So to start off here, we're going to do a little story time, everybody, and talk about the ancient Egyptian origin story. Before creation, according to Egyptian mythology, only darkness embraced the primeval ocean, out of which life would come. When the breath of life was strong and ready, the entity called Atum decided it was time for creation to begin. As I read this, I want you to hear words and really listen to the words that are spoken here and see if you can draw connections on not only other origin stories, because this is a part of a presentation with 300 other origin stories, but also a connection to even scientific awareness. For example, I just said the word atom. So just keep that in mind as I read this. The entity called Atum decided it was time for creation to begin. An island emerged from the water to support this divinity, who manifested itself in the form of Ra, the sun god of Egypt. On the primeval hill, Ra created out of himself the first gods, Shu, which is dryness and air, and his partner, Tefnut, which is humidity, who created engender other gods to complete the cosmos. Jeb, the earth god, and Nut, the sky goddess. In turn, these two birthed the principles of life, namely Osiris, the perfect being who eventually would rule over the rest of the world, which Ra was busy creating by naming the elements. And humankind happened to manifest out of the tears of his eyes. Osiris was a kind and wise ruler who taught humans agriculture and civilization. With his sister/wife, Isis, who helped her husband with creativity and magic, they formed a perfect couple. Their brother Seth was strong but unruly, the opposite of his brother. In fact, Seth envied Osiris so much that he killed him so he could inherit his throne and rule Egypt in the way that he wanted. Seth's sister/partner, Nephthys, could not stop the murder despite her love for their siblings. Killing Osiris turned out to be not such a bad idea. He was then resurrected. And I highlighted the word resurrected because that's something we see quite a lot in ancient scriptures, Greece, India, and beyond, and even Christianity with Jesus, the resurrection. He was resurrected. And we also see the resurrection and the killing of the old gods. He was resurrected through the magic of his wife long enough to be impregnated with her son Horus, who will later avenge his father and recapture the throne of Egypt. Then Osiris departed to the other world to rule over the deceased, thus ensuring resurrection. And now the karmic cycle of life begins. So that's the story. And see if I can share something I've hidden here. So what we see in a lot of origin stories, and I'll skip all that. What we see in a lot of origin stories is this concept of the void and the darkness in the beginning. And a lot of times there is the cosmic egg. Many, many times, hundreds of origin stories all have this reference to an egg, a cosmic egg, that it cracks open and basically everything emerges out of it, almost like the order becomes the chaos or the chaos becomes the order. And when the infinite singularity, which is the infinite singularity of the cosmic egg, cracks open, we then begin to experience the duality of good, evil, love, hate, light, darkness. All of those things start manifesting from it. And the Egyptian story really goes to the same narrative as well, that there was void, nothingness, right? The black hole, the singularity, and within that singularity manifested this thing that was infinite in potential. And then once it burst open, countless possibilities emerged from it, right? So that's just a little bit about the origin story there, just to build the foundation of everything that I'm going to share. Now, jumping completely forward here, going into migration route. So why did I get interested in Kemet in the first place? The reason why I was interested was because for many years, like I think since 2001, when I got into Sumerian scriptures and I started watching William Henry in 2001, and Jordan Maxwell and some other people, I was really interested in, the origins of India. How did Neil from North India out of a state called Punjab, what happened to my migration routes? How did I even get there? So I studied the Indus Valley civilization. I studied Egypt. I studied Proto-Indo-European migration routes. And during the world situation the last couple of years, I watched like videos just on migration routes, like really trying to like figure it out. The more I was trying to figure it out, the more confused I got. It's just too much to even digest. So as I started really trying to figure out, okay, what is my, and I shared earlier, I did my DNA results and it just came back Indian. So I couldn't really dissect what are what tribes migrated into India in order to create me. And when I was researching, I started figuring out that, well, South Indians over there's actually a mountain range that covers up most of India from from west to east. Past that mountain range, even though there are genetic similarities to North India, a lot of those individuals there have some sort of even more variation in genetics that seem like a lot of tribes, a lot of invasions, a lot of migrations that occurred didn't go further than that mountain range, or very few of them did, just because of the terrain and it was difficult to go over, therefore allowing the southern Indians all the way in the south to have a little bit of a unique and not entirely similar DNA and genetics than the ones in the north. So as I was doing my research, I said, well, it looks like um, I've had probably Egyptian in me, that because a lot of Egyptian, even yoga, Kemetic yoga and chakra system and so many other components, the third eye, right? The eye of Horus, the pineal gland, pituitary gland cutout, a lot of that came from Egypt and then was most likely shared with India. What a lot of people don't speak on is that, the Egyptian empire, the Indus Valley civilization, and the Mesopotamia overlapped and coexisted, and they all were right next to each other. So to think that they didn't share information and there wasn't migrations would probably be ignorant, right? So they definitely were around there, and they were the cradle. Those were the cradles of civilization at the time. So Egypt slash Kemet, I figured was probably I had some genetic connection to them. The land of Kush, which was a part of Egypt, and then separated, and then they became, were in war with each other. And Kushan pharaohs actually conquered Egypt a few times, and the Egyptian pharaohs conquered Kush, and at times they were at peace. All types of things happen over thousands of years. The Aryan migration, which is a really controversial topic because some people completely deny that it even happened. Some people say it was an invasion. Some people say it was a migration. Some people say that it was an out of India theory rather than a migration down south. Iranian farmers, which were the farmers that were in current day Iran that lived north of the Indus Valley civilization, the Mesopotamians that were just directly northwest of the Indus Valley civilization, and the Mongolians, right? The Mongolians came and invaded, and then other Islamic tribes that came and invaded as well. So there was a migration that occurred that I tracked that did actually occur. There was a migration to the Hindu Kush Valley that maybe was the foundation of the creating the Indus Valley civilization, maybe around 2900 BCE or a little earlier. And the Indus Valley civilization most likely was a combination of multiple cultures, including the Mesopotamians. So they eventually began migrating south into India and then merging with whatever the current population was down there. The Vedas were thought to be written about 1,000 years later after that, but definitely was verbally communicated for centuries or more before. And now here is kind of the migration route, So let's go down here. You can probably see my cursor. We have Egypt, and then we have that little area right there where that arrow is below Egypt. This is where Kush is, the Kushan Empire, because Egypt probably could have spanned the whole North Africa, because 13,000 years ago, the Sahara Desert was a lush oasis. And during the Ice Age, the North and the South was pretty much frozen over. And the best place to live was wrapped around the equator. So for thousands of years, probably the most luscious and the best place to live on Earth would have been the Egyptian peninsula, all of North Africa, going all the way to Morocco, which therefore, and now that we know that Egypt probably dates back to at least, well, someone was there building the Sphinx to at least 11,900 BC or before, that was when that whole area was a beautiful oasis. So the Kush Empire, not to be confused with the Kushan Empire, which was an Indian civilization empire that came across thousands of years later, was down here in the south. So my theory is, from piecing together information, because there isn't enough about this out there, is that the Egyptians and the Kush people were at war, and the Egyptians were actually, this is at a lower level of consciousness, right? This isn't at basically in the ancient past with the higher consciousness they had. And the Kushan people needed to leave. So they migrated, and they went over here, and they went over the Dead Sea, and they went through what is current day Yemen, and they went over here into modern day Afghanistan, creating what? The Indus Valley civilization. And this map proves the actual route out of Africa of the tribe that was actually there, that actually went through Yemen and then went into this area, the Cushion Valley civilization. So here is the dot connecting. Okay, so we have the people of Kush, right? Well, then this whole area ended up being called the Hindu Kush Valley, right? Wrapping around all of Afghanistan to the north of the Himalayas. So is it just a coincidence that in the same time the migration occurred, that this whole valley was called the Hindu Kush Valley, right? And then we also see something else, the cultivation of cannabis. So cannabis was actually, for 20,000 years before, was only in China, really harvested and cultivated there. And then the migration out of China from the Proto-Indo Europeans that were there migrated south, and they brought cannabis to be cultivated in this area right here, in this valley civilization, at the exact same time as the migration occurred. Okay, so and then what was the original name of cannabis? Kush. The original name of cannabis was Kush, and then the original strain that we get from that area is called the Hindu Kush strain, that comes from the name of the Hindu Kush Valley, which connects to the Kush people right here. And then what does the word Kush stand for in Sanskrit? Happiness, right? So those are just some dots I was connecting as I was looking at the migration route. And you can see here, the Kush civilization was right south of Egypt. And now we have the Indus Valley civilization here that could have been this migration of many cultures. So we have the Iranian farmers that were up here, right, north. We have Mesopotamia that was over here, still in existence. And then we have migration coming south. And it was very interesting because the Indus Valley civilization had no signs of hierarchy, no sign of hierarchy. It was like they were all equal. It was like an experiment of fifth dimensional living. And so to me, I've done some research on Palenque, where I think in 3000 BC, Palenque had the same kind of thing, where it was like an experiment of many ancient cultures coming together. I feel the Indus Valley civilization was a combination of many ancient cultures that all came down there and left their hierarchical places they were in order to have a new experiment of how to live and exist. And it probably was Mesopotamians, Iranian, the farmers, don't know the name of the tribe, and also the Kushans, who were actually Egyptians, just fragmented from them for thousands of years, or maybe 1,000+ years, but still trading with them, sometimes warring, sometimes being at peace, sometimes actually ruling Egypt. And then here is the migration of then we have another migration route. Where is this? This is actually Mesopotamia and Iran. And here we have the Hindu Kush Valley. All right, so that is the only part I'm going to share for that presentation. If you want to see the whole presentation, it's on my website, Origin Stories of Creation Stories of Ancient Civilizations. But now I'm going to get into sound harmonics. Okay, let's do sound harmonics and Egypt. So welcome again, everybody, to the land of Kemet. And here's the beautiful Sphinx. We're going to start out with this video from the Portal to Ascension conference in 2018 with Robert Schoch, in which he breaks down the dating.
Indicates that this was suggested if
the dating of the Sphinx.
Who was working with us at the time. This is early 1990s, John Anthony West, the subject of study, the Sphinx, my young me. And what we found is that we had uneven weathering around the Sphinx. What this suggests, doesn't just suggest, I mean, it's very evident to me, the Sphinx was actually carved out initially on 3 sides. Then it was later fully carved in the back. This level of weathering, which is much more shallow in the back, is compatible with and compares well with the subsurface mineralogical changes, so that's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about subsurface weathering, that we have for other Old Kingdom dynastic, fourth dynasty tombs and structures that are supposedly contemporaneous with the original Sphinx. Does everyone follow? The fact that you have much, much deeper weathering around the other three sites indicates that this was carved out earlier. The body was carved out earlier. And actually what happens when you look there is that initially, you see how you have the older weathering here? The Sphinx was only carved down to this point approximately initially, so it emerged out of the bedrock, and then I believe in the fourth dynasty, about 2500 BC, they were not carving the Sphinx originally, they were recarving parts of it, including the head, sometime in dynastic times, along the back, etc. So initially, the Sphinx actually emerged from the bedrock, which is interesting because in the age of Leo, about 10,000 BC, when the Sphinx sits due east, at that time in the age of Leo, what rose on the horizon due east on the vernal equinox? The constellation Leo. And when you view it from this vantage point, arguably it rises that way with the rump. You see how the rump sort of attaches to the horizon initially as it comes up. Now, I am not basing my dating on Leo and when Leo rose, but I think it's interesting that it's compatible and seems to tie in with my dating. My dating currently for the core portion of the Sphinx, the core body of the Sphinx, is about 10,000 BC. Why? What I've done is calibrate how quickly, or slowly I should say, the subsurface weathering will take place. So it's really based, the core dating for me is based primarily on the seismic evidence and calibrating that. And you can read about that if you want to in Origins of the Sphinx. I'll show a picture of that book in shortly. And I'm not pushy, I'm just saying that's where
So you can check that whole thing out on YouTube. We have the whole presentation there, youtube.com/portal to ascension. But the fact is that there's enough evidence to suggest now that Egypt and pre-dynastic Egypt goes way beyond what we've been told. And the thing with carbon dating is, the thing with modern day science is that we have this arrogance of, because we have modern day science, we pretty much believe anything scientists say. So when we're told a certain date, people believe it. And because of carbon dating, a lot of people don't know how it works. You can only carbon date organic material. You can't carbon date a pyramid. All you can do is look for hieroglyphs that hopefully give you some sign of a dating, or you can look at the last piece of papyrus or a piece of wood and carbon date that. And how are you to know that that dating is the date of the actual structure? So when it comes to these pyramids, they're not made out of organic material, matter, right? And then if you find remains of certain beings or mummies and things and you carbon date those, when you carbon date that, it doesn't mean that that was the first inhabitant of these structures. So now we're finding out and piecing together more and more that Egypt is definitely older than we've been told. And it was kind of fringe archaeology. And the thing within the archaeology, is that a lot of people don't want to come out with anomalies that come out in Egypt for fear of losing their funding, for fear of being ridiculed, for fear of like losing their colleagues within it, but especially when it comes to funding. So is there a nefarious reason why some of these people don't want to disclose the actual evidence that is coming out that proves Egypt is probably older than we know? We can only speculate, possibly, but definitely, as Robert Schock and others have suggested, and Graham Hancock have suggested, is that a lot of these individuals most likely will lose the grants and funding if they come against the conventional timeline. So when some anomalies are found, they're just swept under the rug. It's much easier to do that than to come up with a whole new concept of, what Egypt was. And the fact that we were supposed to be pretty primitive, and civilization as we know it shouldn't have started till later, right? We hear Sumer being the cradle of civilization. We hear the Indus Valley civilization being the cradle of civilization for India. which is also not entirely correct. That's only 50% true, right? Not even that, because there was another civilization in India already. We don't talk about that. So it's just all of this information with all this misinformation as well that throws us off. It's half truths, right? So there's a documentary on Netflix with a lot of colleagues, my colleagues, and a lot of people I've had on Portal to Ascension, called The Pyramid Code. I recommend you watch it. And it's a 5-episode series. And in this, they break down pyramid information on a whole unprecedented level. And in one of them, they showed that underneath at least this one pyramid, there are actually aqueducts, right? Aqueducts, and there's copper rods in the aqueducts going into the pyramids. So the Nile River was actually, through geological studies, was actually on the other side of the pyramids around 13,000 years ago, 10,000, 11,000 years ago. The actual dating of when these things may have been. And what could have possibly happened is that the Nile River would overflow during certain seasons when it would rain. And remember, the Sahara Desert that long ago was a lush oasis. And the water would go in these aqueducts, creating an electrical current. This electrical current will go into these copper rods, creating a frequency. These copper rods would end into hollowed out tubes in the pyramids, possibly creating harmonics and vibration, some sound. And they have that in the Pyramid Code if you want to look deeper into it. So, Flo touched on this. The Hertag spoke about this, and I'm going to keep talking about it, that there is not only mathematical genius within ancient Egypt, but sound and harmonics was definitely kept in mind. And we see that for a lot of ancient structures, whether it's County Meath, Ireland, with a structure there 3000 BC emanating 110 hertz, right? Or if it's the way they create these structures, archaeological sites down here in the Yucatan Peninsula with harmonics in mind, or ancient Egypt, that there was some advanced acoustic organic understanding of sound and harmonics, and utilized in a way where they didn't need wires and technology that we do now, but created structures that emanated certain sounds or responded to certain sounds. So here are some possible uses of sound in ancient Egypt. There's a 2600 year BC papyrus that states the Great Pyramid of Giza was created in 20 years. The pyramid contains 2.3 million individual blocks of stone, meaning one block would have had to be laid every 5 minutes of every hour, 24 hours a day for 20 years. Every 5 minutes of every hour, 24 hours a day for 20 years. But what's the problem with that? Each block weighs at least 2 tons. So that's 1,764,000 pounds of stone being laid every day for 20 years. Well, so this is one of the theories that maybe sound and vibration was utilized, levitation was used, or there was some sort of other technology and it wasn't built in that, in the years that we've been told was built much earlier. Because as we devolved in consciousness and egos started getting bigger and bigger and bigger, a lot of these pharaohs wanted to take credit for things. And there is evidence to suggest that some of them try to say they built things that maybe they didn't build at all. So was levitation used in this? Possibly. Sound in language. Egyptian, well, what am I doing right now? I'm literally using sound harmonics and vibrating my entire insides just to communicate with you. Egyptian language was created in a way to emphasize specific frequencies, very much like Sanskrit. Sound frequency is generated by aqueducts that turn sound frequency when entering the pyramid, like I just showed you. So were these some sort of energy generating devices sending frequencies into the structure, and for what purpose? Was it to receive enlightenment? Was it to speak to extraterrestrial and divine celestial beings? Was it to heal people of certain ailments? Or was it a battery to create a grid work around the planet as we were devolving in consciousness in order to keep us at a certain level, utilizing the Earth's natural frequency because of the ley lines they were created on? Or was it all of those? And here's another possibility. Was the Great Pyramid of Giza some sort of power plant built with frequencies in mind, like I just suggested? Experiments conducted by Tom Danley in the King's Chamber of the Great Pyramid and in the chambers above the King's Chamber suggest the pyramid was constructed with a sonic purpose. Danley identifies 4 resident frequencies or notes that are enhanced by the structure of the pyramid and by the materials used in its construction. Enhanced by the structure and the materials. The materials were used in a way that were intentional. As you'll see when I go into the Pythagoras info, every single part of Egypt seems to be intentional. The notes start from an F sharp chord, which according to ancient Egyptian texts were the harmonic replica of Earth. Ley lines, harmonic frequency of planet. Moreover, Danley tests show that these frequencies are present in the king's chamber even when no sounds are being produced. Let me say that again. The tests show that these frequencies are present in the chamber even when no sounds are being produced. The wind literally just emanates this frequency on such a subtle level that the frequencies are there even when you're not actually humming in there, sending a tone in there, amplifying it. They are there in frequency range from 16 hertz down to half hertz, well below the range of human hearing. That's how it, so normally it's on that level, which, you know, is below our hearing. So according to Danley, these vibrations are caused by the wind blowing across the ends of the so-called shafts in the same way as sounds are created when one blows across the top of a bottle. And that's what I've found through my research down here in the Yucatan Peninsula as well, is that the frequencies are being played. And the Palenque has some structures there that emanate harmonics. I'm not going to show you this video because it's copywritten, and if I ever launch this online, I'm going to get issues with it. But this is a video on YouTube. You can take a look in this Russian study, and basically we're levitating rocks. We found harmonics and frequencies to levitate rocks. It shows you a couple of tests real quick of it just coming up there, and then they hit one frequency and all the rocks, huge structures, it gets larger than this, just levitating for a good amount of time. So it wouldn't be difficult or as far reach to suggest that levitation could be used, because we are now at a state where we're able to use frequencies to levitate rocks. Now, this video here is from someone I've done many presentations with, Brian Forrester, and this is him in the Red Pyramid of Egypt. And just to show you the frequencies and how these structures respond to people harmonizing within the structures, which the Hertax have done. I'm not sure if it's been this one, or they've definitely done it others, and they did it in their presentation. But no matter what they tone and what they do in this structure, it seems to be one note that manifests from all the tones combined.
This is the entrance to the Red Pyramid. We're going down the shaft, and we're going to go into these incredible rooms, which are acoustic chambers. Forget about the idea of tombs, think sound and vibrational technology. So this is actually inside, about 20 feet, more than 100 feet to go. Okay, now we're maybe a third of the way in. And Yusuf Almian, the dark figure, is about to come past me. Okay, maybe halfway down now, and the heat is already starting to pick up in here, as well as the heat generated by anticipation and awe. Okay, so we're at the bottom of the descending passageway. It's got to be 90 degrees Fahrenheit in here right now. And now we're going sideways. Of the main chambers of the Red Pyramid, and it is tuned to A. That seems to be the sound that it likes the best. So I've just walked through a short tunnel into the second of the chambers here, and the sides of them taper in with these almost baffle-like stones. And of course that is, it could be actually an acoustic cone filter of some kind. The lighting's pretty terrible, but you can see there is a massive crack in the solid stone. And that's part of the theory, again, that this was an energy generating device, as were some of the others of the pyramids on the Giza Plateau, and that they actually became overloaded at one point, partially exploded, and then shut down. And as hard as it may be imagined to believe, we could be talking about that explosion occurring about 12,000 years ago at the end of the last ice age. And then we go up 5.
So that's it for that one. But so a few things there: the harmonics creating the note A, right? And then we have the explosion that looks like, you know, that he said that it could have been around 12,000 years ago, which goes with the whole Yuga cycle story of, and the devolution of consciousness, that as we were devolving, these pyramids were created to create a grid work around the planet to keep the consciousness level or tapped into a certain level. And as we devolved, they couldn't sustain anymore, and it was inevitable. We needed to go into this lower Yuga cycle, and that they basically exploded or overpowered and shut down. And so what's happening now, some people speculate that they're coming back online. So let's talk about the note A. So now I spoke earlier about the Indian connection, right? The chakra system. The reason I did that was really to create the foundation for this. So there is definite information out there that looks like that the chakras could have actually been something that was they're aware of in ancient Egypt. And then we have the note A, which in India is connected to the third eye frequency. So the sound that was coming out of that structure was the sound of the third eye. And then we have the Egyptian, you know, the mystery schools and the Eye of Horus that we have right here, which is actually a visual representation of the cutout of the pituitary gland and the pineal gland in our own brains, right? Just to completely drive home the genius of these Kemetic individuals here, you know, and the awareness that they're tapped into. So not only did they create this beautiful visualization of a mystery school, and there was one that was facing one way, one was facing the other. I forget the name of the other mystery school, but we definitely have the Eye of Horus. And then, so this right here is this visual representation. So we have the note A, we have the third eye, we have the symbolism of the third eye, which also connects to the exact like visual representation of how it looks like if we had a cross intersection of our brains, which goes to the music intervals. That they even created this structure in a way that created it. They even created this symbol in a way that was directly connected to music intervals. So we have the note A, harmonics. We have third eye, the enlightenment phase. We have the symbolism of the eye, which represents the third eye, which is also a cross reference, a cross intersection of our brains, which is directly connected to the actual intervals in the musical scale. So in ancient Kemet, vowel sounds were actually not utilized until later, right? Somewhere in pre-dynastic Egypt, but dating back even further. For example, the word, actually, I'll get to that in a second here, but ancient Egyptians thought that the sounds of the vowels were too sacred, so they left them out. But we see that in Sumer, right? In ancient Mesopotamian scriptures, dating back even beyond Sumer. We see that in the Indus Valley civilization and the languages of Sanskrit, that vowel sounds weren't utilized at first. They were too sacred, so they were left out. The vowels got introduced within Eastern cultures' variations of chants for healing and spiritual ascension. So we see the introduction of vowels when we went from one Yuga cycle into the next, when we were devolving in consciousness, maybe the same time the pyramids were going offline, that they started introducing vowel sounds to do what? Heal and create ascension in order to activate us, because the vowel sounds connect to our chakra system and beyond and connect us to the divinity, even maybe celestial beings. So we don't see them until a little later. Vowels were not introduced into spoken language many years after we began writing and documenting our experiences on Earth this time around, right? Because if you believe in the cycles of time, the 26,000 year cycle, we could have done this multiple times. So this cycle, right, when we started devolving and reascending like we're doing now, and language was introduced, we can't speculate on how it was 26,000 years before that, or 52,000 years before that. It could have happened many times in different ways. Vowels could have been lost, not utilized, made sacred, and then implemented in society. Who knows? So let's just talk about the history of vowel chanting for a moment here. In India, many have verbalized the sound of the universe as Om, right? There was the Big Bang. When the Big Bang happened, or the cosmic egg cracked open, the sound was Om. And that's the sound of the universe, of all creation. Everything came from Om. In Tibet, Buddhist monks created an otherworldly form of chant. Their attempt to reproduce audibly something of the inner sounds that they heard during meditation. That was the origination of their chanting. And various Christian, Hermetic, and other Gnostic schools of Egypt also devised forms of a chant that they perceived as verbally mimicking, expressing the real name of God that otherwise is hidden in the sounds of the soul, which was all vowels. They perceived it as that. In Scythian Jewish Gnostic text called the Gospel of the Egyptians is an example of the vowel chant of Gnosticism, a kind of Western equivalent to Om, Om. Gnostic chanted various combinations of vowels, have included them in prayers. And here is a Gnostic chant. I praise you. I call your name that is hidden within me. Ai-o-yao, ai-o-yao, right? Chanted probably with a deeper breath. And it's calling on the vibration of the source. Gospel of the Egyptians and other Nag Hammadi texts. The long vowel chant of the Gospel of the Egyptians spells out I-E-O-U, a sacred name of God, according to some. And here are a couple examples. In ancient Egypt, Kemet, well, before Kemet was the letter E was introduced into Kemet, it was Kemet, Kemet, K-M-T, no vowels. Even the sound Ankh, the original sound of the Ankh wasn't Ankh, it was Unk, Unk. A was added later. Vowels introduced into communication thousands of years later. And the question is why? Possibly to keep us activated, to keep us at a level of consciousness as we were devolving? I personally believe so.